On February 16, 2024, Russian political prisoner Alexei Navalny was allowed a brief walk in the prison yard of the Siberian penal fortress known as Polar Wolf. It was on that tundra that he collapsed and died. He was 47. I'm Larry Fedorik, and this is Later That Same Life. Each week on my podcast, a different topic, discussion, or story from our lives.
Season 12, Chapter 3.
Navalny.
If you are killed, if this does happen, what message do you leave behind to the Russian people?
I was aware of Alexei Navalny in 2018 when he ran for mayor of Moscow. Not that I follow the civic politics of the Russian capital, but there was news of this guy running for mayor. He was different. A crusader for democracy, anti-corruption, a man of the people. Sure he was. Was he really, or was he say anything to get elected? He didn't. But he didn't go away. He set his sights on the Russian presidency. Don Quixote, chasing windmills. Even hearing about all this, his name didn't register with me. Navalny, that guy. Just another in a long line of Russian dissidents. As a matter of fact, the word itself, dissident, in the Western world was synonymous with Russian. Sure, all nations have dissidents, but I'll bet you if we were still playing match game, and if Gene Rayburn showed me the final puzzle and it was blank dissident, the number one answer for the big money would be Russian. Charles Nelson Riley would say Russian, and the contestant would go with Charles and say Russian. If you get any of those references, by the way, you're as old as me and Putin. Russia, more dissidents per capita than any other country. That's not a hard fact, by the way. I'm just guessing. Russia, a bizarre history of rule and revolution that might speak to their identity crisis. Over 1,300 years, they've been a Viking colony, a Mongol territory, a Tsardom imperial monarchy, Orthodox Christian, communist, even tried capitalism for a bit. Big Mexican, duh, I want fries with that. And now a pure dictatorship. A kleptocracy with one big mafia boss who is so cruel that he doesn't even grant favors on this, the day of his daughter's wedding. Some people think it's in the Russian DNA to be ruled by an autocratic leader. Russia truly has one of the more interesting national histories. In the 1500s, they began expansion to much of what they are today, the largest landmass nation in the world. Mind you, 2/3 of that is permafrost. But hey, it's still real estate, and the world is warming. Anyway, all to say that our North American perception of Russia is that it is what it is. Too bad, so sad, whatever you do over there. I may object to it in principle, but otherwise doesn't really affect me day to day. Well, it didn't, but then in random order there was a G8, Trump, Olympics, FIFA World Cup, invasion of Crimea, then Ukraine, Russian hackers, likely government-backed, election interference all around the world, and general mayhem and douchebaggery. The world was aghast, but there seemed to be only one guy in Russia speaking out against the criminal oligarchs, Alexei Navalny. Yet still, to me, his name was not top of mind. What really brought his fight to the fore was the 2022 documentary simply called Navalny. Navalny is a CNN-backed film, directed by a young Toronto filmmaker, Daniel Rohr. It went on to win the Best Documentary Academy Award. It's outstanding. Okay, true story, this is the first time I'm sharing. When CNN first aired this doc about 2 years ago, they ran promotional ads for it, a lot of them. I always have news on TV on in the background as I'm working. and only half paid attention. I did keep noticing this slide at the end of the ads with the word Navalny all in caps. They didn't say the word, they just showed it. I read it as Naval NY. True story. Wow, they're really promoting the hell out of this Naval NY documentary. I didn't even know New York had a naval base. Well, yeah, of course they do. They're on the water. I wonder what the Naval New York guys are up to that would warrant an entire CNN documentary. Oh yeah, that was me, Mr. Brags about being a smart information consumer. I thought this was an American news military propaganda film. I kept missing the full promo, just catching the end. Navalny in big block letters. Oh, there it is again. Finally, one day, I paused and rewound it. Oh, I felt so stupid all by myself in my office. Navalny. That's that guy, that Russian dissident. Poisoned with Novichok. Recovered in Berlin. Went back to Russia. Got arrested by Putin. That guy. His name is Navalny. Well, that makes more sense. Who cares about the naval base in New York City? Vladimir Putin was born October 7th, 1952, in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. His mother was a factory worker, and his father was a conscript in the Soviet Navy. In 1970, Putin entered what was then Leningrad State University and studied law, graduating in 1975. In that year, he joined the KGB, the Russian Secret Service. We don't know for sure, but it's estimated that training as a KGB agent can last anywhere from 6 to 13 years. Putin surfaces again circa 1983 as a KGB agent in New Zealand. Not sure why he was there, but he posed as a badass shoe salesman in Wellington. Oh yeah, he did. By 1985, he returns to Moscow for more training. He serves in Dresden, East Germany, until 1990. When the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, Putin was virtually trapped in the embassy at Dresden. And while protesters raged outside, he was tasked with burning documents, burning everything. Fast forward, and loyal comrade is rewarded with a high position in the St. Petersburg mayor's office. Rises to deputy mayor. Meanwhile, in Moscow, President Boris Yeltsin is an alcoholic loose cannon train wreck. Putin is called back to help, becomes prime minister in 1999. Within a year, president for life. That's the quick version. By the way, some also believe that Putin popped up briefly in 1988, May 31st in Moscow, visiting U.S. President Ronald Reagan on a walkabout with Mikhail Gorbachev, and a horde of officials in suits. Some of them may have been politicians, others KGB agents. In Russia, it can be difficult to tell the difference. There's a complete video of this walkabout, but there's also a famous photo where Reagan stops to talk to onlookers and shakes hands with a young boy. Behind the boy is a casually dressed tourist with a camera around his neck. Looks to be Vladimir Putin. Photo experts and investigators were able to confirm that this was a real undoctored photo, but could not verify with complete accuracy if the casual dressed tourist is in fact KGB agent Vladimir Putin. Sure looks like him. It's not particularly relevant. It's just kind of bizarre. It all started back in 1975 when a 20-something law grad joined the KGB. Putin studied martial arts since he was 12, but still, that first year of training had to be the toughest. I always think that when you embark on any long-term project, after the first year, you reassess. Wow, that was something. Is this what I want to continue doing? Putin obviously did. He took to it. He completed his first year, June 1976. 1 year of KGB under his belt. June 4th, 1976. a small town about an hour west of Moscow. The husband and wife owners of a local basket factory have their first son, Alexei Navalny. Alexei Navalny earned a law degree and practiced with various firms in Moscow. He also studied securities and exchanges, earning a Yale Fellows Scholarship. He's a smart man. It's difficult to say with any degree of certainty how he became a political activist. We'd be mostly guessing. Was it a sense of fairness in an autocratic country? Was it hard-working parents passing down a set of morals and values? His dual Russian-Ukrainian heritage? Was it that he entered the working world in Russia during a time of glasnost, promises of a democratic future suddenly snatched away? Yes, no, maybe all of those, maybe none. But an activist, he was. He did say on the Navalny documentary that his parents did talk politics around the house. His father's family lived near Chernobyl and were forced to work in a field covered with radioactive dust just to make it look to the world like nothing was wrong. The Oscar-winning documentary Navalny will remain as the definitive story of his fight. It is a must-watch. It chronicles his rise as a political activist, his poisoning, the recovery, and his return to Russia in January of 2021, then his immediate arrest and imprisonment. Since then, we've only seen grainy video glimpses of Navalny in court appearances, looking gaunt, yet hopeful. His wife and now grown children living in America, helping to organize and run a global movement for his freedom and for democracy. By his own words, Navalny describes his persecution in Russia, where Putin and other Kremlin authorities would not even mention him by name, referring only to the criminal in the street. Navalny's tactic was simple: use only a small group of trusted people, minimum budget, and the internet. His videos went viral. His rallies drew thousands and were eventually banned. He himself arrested. Navalny said that for a time he thought this would actually make him too famous to kill. Famous guy. Putin couldn't afford to make him a martyr, or so Navalny thought.
And boy, were you wrong.
Yes, I was very wrong.
In August of 2020, Navalny and a small crew flew to Siberia to make a brief video about local corruption. Navalny expected police and authorities to show up, take away his camera, chase them away. But there was no one. Nothing. This should have been a sign. In the movies, in the westerns, when they say it's awful quiet out there, someone always comes back with, yeah, too quiet. But no one in Siberia said, too quiet. They made their little movie and boarded a plane back home. That's when Alexei Navalny suddenly went into deep spasms of pain. Cell phone footage from other passengers bring us the screams of agony. The plane made an emergency landing, still in Siberia, and Navalny was rushed to a hospital. Guess what? The local doctors, we're using that term loosely, said, oh, no sign of poison. Perhaps he had a seizure because of low blood sugar. Perhaps he ingested some hallucinogenic drugs. It was the signature Russian nerve agent, Novichok. Poisoned. They got into his room at his hotel and applied the chemical to his underwear in the suitcase. The chemical broke down with normal body heat and entered his system through his pores. Poison. Novichok systematically begins switching off nerve connectors in your body, one by one, until your body just stops working. You die. The added evil of it is that after a few hours, all traces of it are gone. That's why it is the preferred Putin poison. Siberian doctors, we assume under orders, refused to release the ailing Navalny despite a growing number of protests throughout Europe. A German charity volunteered to send a plane to take him to Berlin. Angela Merkel who on a side note should go down in history as one of the great European leaders of all time, exerted pressure, and she got this done. By September 2020, Navalny was fighting for his life in a Berlin hospital. Comatose, his wife Yulia by his side. Doctors were not only unsure if they could ever wake him up, but if they did, how much brain damage he might have suffered. Then, one day, with a friend at his side, he opened his eyes. He looked at his friend and said, "What the fuck? This is so stupid." He was back. His friends and family knew that he would want to return to Russia, but to their surprise, he said that he wanted to first fully recover for a few months and go back strong. In those weeks, a group of international journalists helped Alexei prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he was poisoned by agents of the FSB, that is the new KGB, likely at the direction of Vladimir Putin. They put together the story, they released it to social media, and were subsequently covered by every major network in the free world. Many had asked the obvious question, why do you plan to go back? You are in extreme danger. Can you not fight this fight in exile? Navalny has said that he could not expect Russian people in Russia to live under that oppression while fighting unless he was willing to do the same. As he flew towards Russia, there were protests in the street in January of 2021, especially where Alexei and Yulia were expected to land. Suddenly, authorities diverted his plane to another city, where Alexei was promptly arrested at the airport. His latest sentence on trumped-up charges was 30 years. About 6 weeks before his death, he went missing for a couple of weeks, turning up in this remote Siberian prison fortress. That's where he died. Murder, and I believe that to be true, either by direct poison or by neglect, lack of care, deterioration of condition. On the day of the announcement of his passing, his wife was due to speak at the 2024 Munich Security Conference. She said she was torn whether to go on or rush home and be with her family. She made this speech. She said she asked herself, what would Alexei want me to do? She spoke eloquently, saying Putin and his friends should be held accountable and that the world needs to come together to defeat this evil. Alexei's mother traveled to the extreme northern locale. It was a full week before she was even allowed to see his body. It was reported that she was being pressured and extorted to avoid a funeral. Navalny's spokespeople have said there will be a public funeral. But in another bizarre development, some of Navalny's own people said they were in the process of negotiating his release. That as late as February 15th, they were in final negotiations to swap Navalny and 2 other political prisoners for a Russian spy serving a life sentence in Germany. Do you believe that Putin, while negotiating to free Navalny, would actually transfer him thousands of miles into Siberia? Or that mere hours before his release, he suddenly collapsed and died? Putin did martyr Alexei Navalny. Putin is up for re-election in the coming weeks. Putin up for re-election. Let the ridiculousness of that sentence sit with you for a moment. Navalny's rallies did draw thousands, his videos millions. All of those people just don't go away. I guess some do, and you can't blame them. They live in fear of their lives and that of their families. But the chord Navalny struck still resonates. The philosopher Kierkegaard said, when a tyrant dies, his rule ends. When a martyr dies, his rule begins. Sitting in a park in Paris, France, reading the news, and it sure looks bad. They won't give peace a chance. It's just a dream some of us had. Yeah, I just quoted a 50-some-year-old Joni Mitchell lyric for no apparent reason, other than that line has stuck with me all this time. Just a dream some of us had. A child born in 1976 whose destiny was freedom fighter, then martyr. 1976, the first Trudeau was our prime minister. Jimmy Carter would soon become U.S. president. Apple introduced a computer for your home. The classic film Gone with the Wind was shown in its entirety for the first time on television on something called Home Box Office. We were also introduced to this thing, a VHS. What could be the point of that? The CN Tower in Toronto first opened to the public. I don't know what all that means. Maybe I'm just feeling a little nostalgic, but that was then. This is now. Here we are in a time where politicians pose as leaders, while leaders are forced to play politics. People fight to take charge, but refuse to take responsibility. Turmoil is the new normal. Alexei Navalny, in today's world, sadly a rare individual. But the end of his life is not the end of hope. I'll leave you with a quote from Benazir Bhutto. You can imprison a man, but not an idea. You can exile a man, but not an idea. You can kill a man, but not an idea.
Later That Same Life is written, produced, and voiced by Larry Fedoruk. LarryFedoruk37@gmail.com. Subscribe to Larry's podcast YouTube channel. Get automatic notifications with each new episode.
My message for the situation when I'm killed is very simple: not give up.